My name, as Catherine stated, is I'm Aaron Remmel. I'm a product manager here at Oracle with observability and management. As she said, today we're going to discuss the 5 easy steps to reclaim control of your e-business suite and PeopleSoft monitoring, running an OCI with Stack monitoring. With that said, let's go ahead and get this party started. So my agenda, it's relatively easy today. We're going to go do that. We're going to do a quick introduction to Oracle's overall observability and management strategy, and kind of review a little bit about stack monitoring. That way, we're all kind of on the same page. I like to start out kind of always the same way. It's good for you to have an understanding of not only, what solution we're talking about today, but the overall strategy and how that fits in. After that, we're going to get right into the meat of this presentation. 5 easy steps to reclaim control of your packaged apps. I'm going to do one, as time permits, one larger demo along the way to just kind of show you, instead of in slide form, what the product actually looks like. Because to be honest with you, it's probably a lot more fun than sitting here, listening to me talk. So there we go. Oracle's observability and management provides solutions that improve user experience by offering a curated set of services and applied observability that help customers discover, operate, secure, improve, and build upon complex distributed IT systems, especially when users are not technical experts in the underlying systems themselves. And you'll see how stack monitoring kind of helps play into that and empowers the user by doing a lot of automation behind the scenes to help elevate a lot of the components. Overall, this reduces these redundant tools and processes. It consolidates in the parallel efforts by multiple teams, enforces security and compliance standards, and also includes pervasive automation. We've organized our solutions into these 3 areas of focus so customers have shorter latency for making business decisions to enable a competitive advantage for the business to be more responsive and efficient in your IT and application development organizations. So Stack Monitoring is the service that provides monitoring and advanced alarm management of applications and that underlying infrastructure stack. It's in many cases, and we've got Anna McCollum here as well. She came up with the idea of how this really is like a general practitioner, right? Think of stack monitoring as providing that underlying vital signs of the health and well-being of your application. And with stack monitoring, you can quickly get answers to essential monitoring questions like, what's running in my environment? Is everything up? Do I have any performance degradations? Am I running out of CPU, memory, or storage? Is the current performance expected or is it anomalous? And is this performance of one resource in the application stack impacting that entire application stack? So let's drill down to some of the key features to get us started. We're going to start with discovery. In stack monitoring, you can easily set up and discover in just a few minutes by leveraging a single-click discovery UI. You just complete the blanks, right? Go in, enter the resource name, the host it's running on, the management agent that's going to monitor it, any kind of ports that are in use, and it will discover that entire application stack and its topology. We have native support for applications including eBusiness Suite and PeopleSoft, which is why we're all here today, as well as other application stack technologies, including WebLogic, SOA, OHS, Tomcat, Golden Gate, just to name a few. And support for database monitoring for your Oracle database systems, as well as SQL Server. And fun fact, we're getting close to releasing support for PeopleSoft with a SQL Server backend. So you guys are getting that information before everybody else. After discovery, you can immediately begin monitoring. We provide a curated set of metrics for each of these resource types and built-in monitoring UIs to allow you to quickly answer those essential monitoring questions. And after discovery, you can immediately begin monitoring. And we provide these curated set of metrics out of the box for these resource types with built-in monitoring UIs that allow you to get started quickly. You don't have to go in and try and understand what metrics are important or how to go organize the data in a way that makes sense. We try and help you with that by just giving it to you out of the box. So for example, our built-in enterprise summary, which we'll go over, it's enterprise health and alarms. It provides an overview of the health and open alarms. You can identify resource outages, performance outliers, and as you're troubleshooting, you can quickly change metrics and charts, and we're going to show you a little bit about that as we get further into this. Another key monitoring UI that we're going to talk about is the stack view, and that gives you that quick assessment of application health for EBS, PeopleSoft, Golden Gate, you name it. And then using machine learning, we can also identify the performance baselines and auto detect anomalies. You can also extend monitoring by adding your own custom metrics with metric extensions, or by creating new resource types by identifying the process signature or any infrastructure that exposes metrics through like Prometheus, Collectd, and Telegraph. And finally, alarms is a big part of monitoring. And I'm also going to show you not only how to set up monitoring quick and easy, but also how the summarization that we provide really puts it in, for lack of a better term, a human readable form, something that's easily consumable, by you and me. So to get started, first we've got to complete our monitoring story. And that leads us to step one. Complete the monitoring story, monitor the entire application stack. So as I said, monitoring begins with discovery. And we provide that fill in the blank UI that discovers an entire EBS application stack and its topology. First, we recommend discovering your hosts. And to help save time, I don't know if you've tried it, host auto promotion. Host auto promotion, anytime an OCI compute is provisioned, it will automatically go enable that management agent for you and automatically go apply what we'll go over here later, a monitoring template. And it's kind of a set it and forget it. It's like I like to think about it. Once you set that up, monitoring just happens and you can go focus on other things. Once the hosts are being monitored, the next step is the database. And that's whether the Oracle database or your SQL server. If you're doing an Oracle database, you can also discover that entire database system, the listener, ASM, cluster, etc. With all that done, now's when you go discover that app stack. And if it's EBS or PeopleSoft, during that discovery, we'll also go find all of the WebLogic domain clusters, servers, etc., and automatically discover those as part of that. And at the same time, we're also going to go find concurrent manager, notification mailer, WebLogic servers, clusters. We've talked about that. And then we're going to create a topology for you that we'll also discuss a little bit later about how that helps make troubleshooting and navigation quite easy. Monitoring in EBS or PeopleSoft is more than just simply the database, the WebLogic servers, and the concurrent manager. There's also other elements to that EBS or PeopleSoft stack. So to monitor, we need to make sure, as I said, to monitor that entire app stack. And one other item that I like to include is load balancers and storage. Filling in these topology blanks can kind of happen in a number of ways, right? And one is OCI services, where we can pull in that load balancer and that storage. Alternatively, we can also identify, as we stated, the process signature. Before, I used to have an example of Nginx. We support Nginx natively now, but before you could identify the process signature of both the worker and the main process for Nginx, and then monitor those for availability, CPU, memory, etc., just by identifying that process signature. Other ways to also include to complete that topology is with open source tools such as Prometheus, Telegraph, and Collectd, and then bringing that data into Stack Monitoring where we'll treat it like a native resource and you can complete that topology and have home pages and everything else. So we mentioned one way of completing the topology is by importing resources into stack monitoring. Now, the advantage here, there's a couple advantages. One is that we can create the associations between the imported resource and the existing resource. And that helps. So in this one example that I mentioned with load balancers, completing that topology helps inform the user what load balancer services that WebLogic cluster. So we can now easily identify that if one of the two servers is getting load while the other one isn't, we now identify quickly which load balancers attributed, is servicing those servers. And then, as you'll see here in the next slide, it gets even better. So from the home pages, once we import an OCI service, we're gonna create a home page just as if it is any other resource. And again, this is the same for Prometheus, Collectd, Telegraph, etc. We're going to go create the homepage where you can see all the charts, all the same, items. You can also see that we've got this active connections has baselines enabled here. So we're going to be able to do anomaly detection on resources like load balancers. But one of my favorite features, the topology is fantastic. Don't get me wrong. The ability to quickly identify which load balancer is servicing a WebLogic server, fantastic. But once you identify that there is a problem, maybe I like to use this example. Maybe Mike forgot to put Tomcat back in load again. And sadly, this has happened to me more times than once when managing production systems that a server was forgot to put in load after doing maintenance. Being able to quickly identify the load balancer that services that, and then giving you the topology to navigate to that load balancer. And then we also provide you a breadcrumb to be able to take you to that OCI page where you can go change the pool or change any kind of other, rule, whatever it is. You can now navigate from monitoring to infrastructure at the click of a button without ever searching, without ever typing, without ever going through the menu. It's just following the troubleshooting workflow. So with the topology created, now we've got to fill in any missing monitoring. And that can be done uh, in a number of ways. So one of the ways in which to do that is through synthetic testing. And if you've heard me speak before, uh, just like, understanding whether the resource is up and its CPU and memory consumption is vital to understanding, as I said, the health and the well-being of that application, you've also got to understand, is it accessible? So just because I know it's up, is it accessible? And one great way of being able to test that is through synthetic testing. So synthetic testing, it's checked by monitors that run at scheduled intervals. And then APM collects those performance timers to see if performance trends are stable or not. And if something fails, then it's going to generate some files, HAR files, to help give you an indication of why that monitor has failed, and if it's network related or application related. And you can setting these availability targets, you can create dashboards showing percentage availability, which in many cases is used for SLA reporting. These monitors are another great advantage of these monitors is they can be ran publicly from vantage points, both in OCI and other places, as well as within your own vantage points. So if part of your application is internal only, you can set them there. If there's vantage points, if part of your application is external, you can set additional ones there as well and be able to identify, just because the internal folks can reach it, can your customer across the country reach it? Uh, APM also just released some simple Docker images that allow you to kind of help set up some of those custom locations that you might have. I like to kind of bring my personal experience in here. And personally, when I use synthetic testing, I put them everywhere. Many times, like in many ways, I see these as just kind of like a knock at the door. Am I getting a 200? If yes, fantastic. But anywhere where there's change, any load balancer, anytime where there's an ACL rule change, if someone goes in, makes a change to an ACL rule that inadvertently impacts you, it's good having a synthetic test that's also going to feel that same pain. That way you're alerted quickly. Another handy tool for monitoring EBS and PeopleSoft is through tracing. And a quick explanation of distributed tracing. This one is also ridiculously powerful. Um, a span represents a statement of work done by any component in the stack, and a common key is exposed for each application request. So all spans can be related to a trace. This trace then is summarizes all the work for an entire, for a single application request. They can contain performance metrics, log messages, profiles, and for deep diagnostics. APM is a service that can ingest all of that and that span data and create that trace information and store that in a dedicated data store. They can also be created through, our own APM agent and using OpenTelemetry traces. But basically, a simplified version, tracing allows you to see that entire user's transaction from the login all the way to the database and back. Now, while they can't, typically I didn't set them up for absolutely every single thing that was out there, but they could absolutely pinpoint some problems, you know, throughout uh, to help give you an understanding of how exactly that customer is feeling, right? They can see that exact customer experience. Went the wrong way. Sorry about that. All right. So just because the metric doesn't exist doesn't mean it's not important. So we talked about this. Naturally, metrics can be added using extensibility features such as Prometheus, Telegraph, and collectd. But we also provide kind of a simplified, streamlined approach to being able to just add metrics to existing stack monitoring resources. And we do that through metric extensions. Metric extensions, they extend that out of the box metric set provided by stack monitoring to meet those unique business cases required. So I give this example. In my previous life, this was even before monitoring production systems, in my previous life as a DBA, which feels like forever ago, I frequently leveraged custom metrics for my unique business requirements. I had a set of DBMS jobs that had to be set at a specific schedule, and I leveraged those custom metrics to alert me if the database job failed, if it wasn't scheduled, and if it wasn't running on the specific cadence that I suggested. So using metric extensions like this, I was able to significantly reduce my time checking my jobs, checking if my jobs were running as expected and spend more time on performance. This really empowered me as a DBA, and suddenly I had ridiculously more time on my hands to be able to go and take care of these tasks. I didn't have to go be my own bookkeeper. But this also isn't something where, stack monitoring is going to call you guys up one day and say, "Hey, do you guys have any custom jobs that you have run on a schedule? We'd like to go add a new metric." That kind of thing doesn't make sense, and this is a perfect example of how this can help you meet your business case. So the process of creating a metric extension, I don't have enough time to go through the entire thing, but we've got YouTube videos out there that can help you get started. But essentially, a metric extension leverages the collection method by resource type. For example, SQL for Oracle Database, or JMX or REST for WebLogic. It's easy to get started. Once again, it's fill in the blank. You begin by choosing a resource type, a collection method, the frequency of your collection, and then supply the command or script that you want executed. And that output of the metric extension is then organized into dimensions and metrics. A dimension is a qualifier of a metric. So I like to use file system utilization to describe it because it's generally relatively understandable and everybody has to deal with this kind of stuff. The dimension is the file system name, like UO1, where the metric portion is the utilization, like 90% utilized. And the metric always has to be numeric. Metric extensions also use the monitoring credentials that were provided when the resource was discovered. So if I'm discovering a CDB, and when I did it, I provided DBS and MP, then DBS and MP will be the user that's collecting that metric extension for me. All that metric data is collected and stored in OCI monitoring, and it allows for alarms to be created against these. Charts are automatically added to the home page, and they can also be added to the enterprise health and alarm page as well as dashboards. So here's an example of a metric extension on concurrent requests. So I've placed, as a heads up, I've placed the SQL at the end of this presentation and how this was defined. So like Catherine said, she's going to share this presentation with you later, and you can go back and create this metric extension yourself. But the metric extension output, such as this, will automatically be shown in any resource page where it's deployed. But it can also, like I said, be added to that enterprise health and alarms page and dashboards. But let me give you a click here. So here's where we've taken and put this metric extension on a dashboard. And you can see here that it contains the program name, the user executing the command, and how long the command has been running, as well as the SQL ID. And then you can take that SQL ID and run on over to database management service if it needs any kind of, fine tuning. So don't get lost in the weeds. Monitor from macro to micro. So at the macro level, we're going to start with the enterprise health and alarms page. It's easy to get bogged down and overwhelmed by too much data. If there's anything that we have in monitoring these days is data for nearly anything. Monitoring from the macro to the micro pulls you out of the weeds, helps you start broad by monitoring by exception, then drilling in deeper when a potential issue has been identified. So in my production management days and monitoring and managing identity solutions, we were always to blame. It was kind of like blaming the network is what it felt like. Network's always at fault. um, and so it's 2 a.m., 3 a.m., and I'm getting called, and I know nothing about the other solutions that are having problems. I just know that if mine's down, everybody's down, and not everybody's down. And I would do that by monitoring by exception. One of these things isn't like the other, right? I mean, that was the guiding principle of everything that I did. And that's essentially what we're starting with here. You start by identifying resources that are down or not reporting. From the Enterprise Health and Alarm page, the uppermost tier provides you that quick access to those resources. We're also going to organize it into resource types so you can see how many hosts are down or how many components of an EBS or PeopleSoft stack that have availability issues. Next is a count of alarms by severity. So clicking any alarm count invokes a slide out that summarizes each alarm in a format, like I said, that's easily consumable for triage for you and me. The summary includes the resource that's impacted, not its OSID, the offending metric, its current value, as well as other information. Now, what's fantastic about that is it helps those DevOps teams prioritize the alarms based on, okay, number one, based on severity, but also based on current value. If you've got an engineer that's coming in and they're looking at a critical root file system alert that's 98% utilized, they also have another critical alarm for temp that just fired, and it's at 90%, they would likely prioritize the root file system at 98 over a 90% file system alarm. But they can get that information just from that alarm summary screen. Now, the remainder of the Enterprise Health and Alarms page is broken down into tiers that represent the application stack. This includes EBS, PeopleSoft, application servers, databases, and hosts. And from these tiers, you can monitor by exception on those key vital signs. In other words, look for those outliers, right? Clicking on any plot point will invoke a slide out to help you view that historical data that allows you to then drill in further to the resources homepage. And we're going to look at this here in a little bit as well, but the page is completely customizable. Any metric, chart type, resource, tier, all of it, it can all be changed out. If you're an EBS person and you don't care about PeopleSoft, you can remove that and or add additional EBS metrics. If you're a DBA and that's all you care about, fantastic. You can go in, completely customize that just for your DBA needs, save that as your own, and then you can even export that, share it with your friends and family for Christmas, whatever it is that you want to do with it. Another option for monitoring at the macro scale is through dashboards. Now, Stack Monitoring is going to give you EBS, PeopleSoft, host dashboards, etc., to help you get started quickly within the dashboards. They're great for it allows you to kind of get started quick with a dashboard, such as an EBS one shown here, and then add additional widgets. Maybe you want some log data in there. You want some of those APM tracing or synthetics that we talked about. Uh, but this is kind of where you can come in and build that single unified view of the entire application stack. So once an issue has been identified, we start moving from that macro to the micro level. And we do that through as we drill into the resource homepages. And specifically, if we're looking at like a EBS or PeopleSoft, we're going to start off with the stack view. A stack view is shown for many of the out-of-the-box Oracle applications in Stack Monitoring, and it reports on that overall health and performance of a specific EBS, PeopleSoft, Golden Gate, by providing those key metrics for the entire app stack on a single view. For example, here we can see a sample of a PeopleSoft view. The PeopleSoft stack includes metrics like for application server domain, process scheduler domain, PIA, WebLogic server, and host. And you can quickly rule out layers of that stack using anomaly detection. Whereas the EBS stack provides that rapid insight to EBS in its underlying stack. For example, here we've got top EBS programs that can be reviewed to ensure they're within the expected time frame, or completed concurrent requests can be monitored and verified as successful or as verified as goodness gracious, verified as successfully completed. And the JVM heap utilization of the underlying OA core WebLogic managed service can be checked to make sure it's not running out of heap. Again, this is one of those things that might be missed is you might have several WebLogic clusters, but we know that the OA core is kind of that heart of EBS. And if OA core is having a problem, everything's having a problem. The JDBC connection and failure rates can also be monitored to ensure programs can connect successfully, as well as the underlying Oracle database. And speaking of database, you can see transactions by status and wait times, and finally, even host performance to quickly determine if the hosts are running out of CPU and memory that the entire application stack is relying on. So the stack view is as you can see here, just one small section of a resource homepage. EBS and PeopleSoft resource homepages, they also summarize availability and provide that easy access across the stack using topology. So here we can see overall availability of this EBS application. We can see that it not only has resources, parts of its application stack are in a down state, as well as it looks like one is in a not reporting state. Excuse me. Another great feature is anytime we're kind of at that parent level, we're going to summarize those open alarms for you. And what I mean by that is you don't have to go to EBS and then Concurrent Manager and each WebLogic server to go understand what open alarms exist for this application. Anytime you're at that kind of parent level, whether it's a WebLogic cluster or a WebLogic domain, we're going to summarize those open alarms. So as we have 18 here, that means we have 18 open alarms for this EBS application. Now, we've switched over here to an example of PeopleSoft, but what this is showing is it's showing that entire application stack and summarizing all those open alarms. And we mentioned earlier, and this is a great opportunity to have a view at it, is where we're going to show you its severity, when it triggered, the resource name, the metric name, as well as the dimension and the current value. So again, we just went and retrieved these current values, so you're empowered to have that to be able to make a decision on what to go tackle first. And earlier I mentioned topology. So the topology, I switched back on purpose here because we have the ability to show this, but we've got the ability to show that entire application's topology, its availability. We also, you can click in to show, performance metrics. So you don't have to navigate throughout that entire stack. If there's something that you want to dive in and just get those key performance metrics real quick, you simply click show, we'll go retrieve that information for you. Now, once you've decided that something, maybe you want to go look further at this down, you can then click on this. We'll also give you a little punch button to go over to a new tab so you don't lose your place as you're working through this. But the topology gives you that just quick access up and down that application stack to go do that triage. So don't overthink it. Anomaly detection helps identify if performance is expected. Now, when discussing the stack view earlier, I mentioned anomaly detection. So for key performance metrics, we're going to automatically calculate those baseline behavior for you using machine learning algorithms. Meaning, what's that area where your application is typically running? What's its min and max kind of throughput on average that it runs on? Baselines, right? So they're that expected range of value for a metric. If it starts deviating or going outside that baseline, then we're going to flag that as anomalous in our charts. And that helps you easily identify if the behavior is different, which could be a sign of a potential problem. Now, if you're looking at it and you're like, Aaron, these metrics here that you've chosen are great, but I really want, you know, uh, memory usage or something. I don't know, whatever it is that we may not already have, but is important to you. Baselines can be enabled on additional metrics to help meet those unique business needs that you might have. So the homepage on this chart highlights several anomalies for both CPU and memory utilization. And they're easily identifiable because the points are, these orange plot points that you can see throughout here. Hovering over any of the data points will also give you that expected range of values to provide context to how far outside the baseline that resource is performing. And I'll show you here later in the demonstration, you can also hide dimensions to be able to make that baseline visible for, any of these metrics. Stack monitoring does require at least 2 hours of metric data to calculate baselines, but the more data, that comes in, the better and more fine-tuned that baseline becomes. So work smarter, not harder. Manage alarms at scale, right? I think in an open world, because that's what it was back then, presentation for EM a long time ago, I used to say laziness breeds innovation. Whatever you can do to automate something that requires you to do less work is always amazing. So with all the resources discovered, load balance and your load balancers imported, custom metrics created like that, uh, concurrent manager request metric extension, the final essential monitoring task is to go set up these alarms. Typically, alarm rules are done on a per metric basis. Over time, it's a challenge, right? Trying to manage all of these different alarm rules for all these different metrics across all the different resource types. It's incredibly difficult to just answer the basic question of what am I monitoring? What are my thresholds? Just for my hosts or my database systems or my EBS application. It's hard to answer this question because you've got to look at individual alarm rules, and there's not a way to just see all these conditions all together. So here's a portion of an PeopleSoft and an e-business suite topology. Now imagine the complexity of creating, standardizing, and maintaining alarm rules for every single resource on this list. Now, this is specific to PeopleSoft and EBS, but it's true for nearly any application. We're talking availability for every one of these. CPU, memory, IO wait time, whatever it is, every single metric for every single one of these resource types, it can easily become a very daunting task. So monitoring templates addresses that by providing a resource-oriented approach to setting up these alarms. For example, for EBS and its components, WebLogic, database, hosts, you just specify the alarm conditions for these resources in a single place so you know exactly what alarm thresholds you have across your app and infrastructure. If you need to review alarm setting, you just go to the template. There's a single place to do that. Once you define your monitoring template, we'll take care of creating all the necessary alarm rules. You don't want to see it behind the scenes, right? Because it's just so much. We're creating what could be thousands of alarm rules for you. And meanwhile, you're just sitting there adding a couple of thresholds and hitting enter. We're trying to make it as easy as possible and give that time back to you as, a DevOps engineer or a DBA or what have you. You can define monitoring templates for your production hosts, your database systems, even custom resource types you add. We'll provide some predefined templates out of the box where we call them Oracle certified metrics or Oracle certified templates. And it gives not only, kind of the recommended, starting place for metrics and their thresholds all together. And it's for all of our out of the box resource types. So when creating a monitoring template, leverage the Oracle certified template like I mentioned, right? It helps you get started, and I'm going to show you this in a quick demo. But I'll show you how I prefer to do it and how what seems to work really well for me. These templates again available for all the out of the box resource types. You can clone them, you can modify the templates to meet your requirements. For example, you can create a template that includes several resource types to holistically monitor like your app stack, whatever that is. But it could be your WebLogic servers, your WebLogic clusters, your hosts, load balancers, maybe a SQL server in there, whatever it is that comprises your monitoring template. Then using these templates as a starting point, add or remove metrics, adjust the warning or critical values, the collection interval. Maybe you don't need it collected every, 1 or 5 minutes, whatever it is. Add in those metric extensions that you've gone in and created. Also, another feature that should be coming really soon um, is we're going to start embedding a link in our alarm message. So when you go in and you use a monitoring template, we'll have a link that will be emailed out so that when the alarm comes in, you just click a button. It's going to take you right to that stack monitoring resource. You don't need to go to, one service, go look here, copy its OSID or whatever it is, then go find it. We're going to try and help, streamline that process of triage to help you move faster and reduce those uh, downtimes. So we know all resources need to be taken down from maintenance and monitoring. This means temporarily suppressing notifications for alarms. Now, today this can be done. You can go in and suppress individual alarm rules, but when you have many alarm rules, it can be, again, it can be a challenge identifying the appropriate subset of alarm rules to go suppress in the first place. So we wanted to streamline this process with a feature called maintenance windows. If you're familiar with Enterprise Manager, it's kind of like a notification blackout. It's a resource-oriented approach to suppressing those alarm notifications. So when creating a maintenance window, the user specifies the resource, the time of the window, and then we take care of the rest, meaning we'll use topology to go understand and find all the different alarm rules that could exist and then put a suppression on those for you. So in this example, if a user wants to have a maintenance window on two hosts, then if you're going to reboot two hosts, then naturally all the resources running on those hosts need to be suppressed as well. So stack monitoring will then use that topology, go out, identify every resource that's running on those two hosts, and also create a suppression for them. It completely saves you from having to go figure out all of it yourself. Now, some use cases for creating maintenance windows. Maybe you've got a maintenance window on Friday at 6 p.m. for all your, Windows hosts to go take a reboot. tickets patching. Maybe you need to create a maintenance window for your EBS prod as you switch from file system 1 to file system 2 for patching. Create a maintenance window every Monday at 10 p.m. for database systems. I don't know. Maybe a maintenance window for Redis for, something that's monitored via collectd. All these different use cases you can are easy and simple to go in and schedule. So earlier I showed you these topologies. Now, instead of creating alarm rules for every single resource here, imagine needing to perform maintenance of the entire application stack and manually having to identify every alarm rule associated with every one of these resources and then create individual suppressions for every one of these. That's where this whole just simplify your maintenance activity, use those topology awareness of the maintenance windows, and the task of determining that appropriate, set of relevant alarms for all those resources we showed to be included in a maintenance window is simple. Just eliminate all that complexity and leverage a maintenance window. We can suppress those notifications, for example, for an entire fleet of hosts, all the resources running on those hosts, all the alarms, for that entire application stack, the app servers, databases, hosts, storage, load balancers, etc., just in a couple clicks. So, with that said, let's jump over to a demo. What I want to do is I wanted to spend a few minutes and show you. I want to run through a quick demonstration so you can kind of see how how you can kind of manipulate the product and use it for that troubleshooting workflow that we've spoken about. So to start off with, we've got the enterprise summary that we discussed where you can quickly identify any resources that aren't reporting. This is typically something where the management agent might have come into some issue. Maybe the management agent ran out of memory or whatever. There's a number of ways in which, maybe the management agent isn't running. Um, but typically that's what a not reporting is. We can quickly identify which resources are in that not reporting state, as well as identify which resources are down, such as my EBS application listener. Now, other things I can do, I can also look at this based by resource type. Once again, this is managed, going from that macro level, right? So of all my, this isn't very many, it's a demo environment, but of my 17 hosts, 4 of them are not reporting. I can quickly, based on whatever it is that I want to see, I can filter by that. But it's also nice being able to show that, 4 components of my EBS application are in a down state, or 1 component of my PeopleSoft is down. Meanwhile, it looks like 1 component of a database system, all of my components of my Golden Gate are up. So it gives you that quick summarization across the different types of resources. Another one we mentioned, alarms. If we want to see critical warning, if we want to see all of them, but we can click critical, we can come down here, quickly see that severity, trigger time, resource name, metric dimension, current value. Again, ridiculously helpful. Here's like this JD Edwards server is 98.96% utilized. So, I mean, that's relatively critical. Over here, we've got my EBS root file system is 84%. Naturally, I would think that I would go after my 98% before my 84%. But it helps me, give you that information. Something I haven't mentioned yet is we'll also inform you if the resource is in a suppression. So if you're looking through this list, hey, look at that. I bet Aaron's working on that. We can just skip this guy. I don't need to pay attention to this alarm because it's being suppressed. So it's just helpful to, again, it's helping you prioritize, how to go triage all of this. Now, moving further down, we talked about the different tiers, right? We've got app servers, database, hosts, um, as well as, EBS and PeopleSoft. We've got your concurrent manager. And what we're going to do, you can see dimensions. See, we've got errored. So we've got the number of completed requests and the number of completed requests by status. So you're understanding how many requests are completing versus how many are completing with errors, and being able to kind of help give you an indication of, you know, almost like a percentage of, how frequent is it occurring that it's completing with errors. Scrolling down, since we keep talking about monitoring by exception, typically things are running in groups. Well, generally they have some level of CPU utilization or load, but identifying that one guy that's out there all by himself, whether that's, this one is CPU, this one's memory, right? This one's using 100% of swap, what is that, 40% of memory. So, this one actually is kind of an outlier. You can click the button, quickly identify what its history is. I can see open alarms that are attributed to both of these metrics. All right, so is this just a fluke? Has this just been happening for the last hour? I can go back and say, well, I don't know, 14 days. And then 14 days it comes back, it gives me this has been relatively consistent as well as showing some different anomalies. And from there, I can drill in directly to that resource itself. Now, since this is a PeopleSoft host, while we're here, we could go over and say, all right, well, we're having some memory. Let's go see if it's impacting, I don't know, the entire PeopleSoft. We could go in and see whether or not it's impacting maybe the whole PeopleSoft application. Here we can see the, status of the process scheduler domain, or the fact that it's contained by a process scheduler group. Let me see if I can go further up. Here we go. We can also get to the whole PeopleSoft application. And we talked about this earlier where, we've got a component of it that is down, the process scheduler domain. We see that this PeopleSoft application currently has 9 open alarms. And again, remember, this is a summarization. So we can see, this PDB alarm associated with it. We can see host alarms. We can see this app server group. So again, it's taking all of those resources that are part of that PeopleSoft application and summarizing it there. So you can go to one place and identify and understand, not only the performance and the availability, but the alarms that are associated with that application. And we can also come down and use uh, our stack view to understand, its current health. Any, running server. Do I have any queued processes? Since my process scheduler is having problems, I don't have any data here. We'll skip over that. But we see again, our PIA is healthy. We do see, open alarms. We talked about being able to show anomalies. Right now, there's no anomaly detected for the JVM memory usage, but we are able to go in and see that kind of information here. I mentioned the baseline level and CPU utilization, since it has only one dimension, it'll show you that baseline average. But let's see, I can hide a dimension of my chart, and now I can see that, what is that typical activity where that JVM memory usage is and how it's, staying within its baseline. Anytime there's more than one dimension, then we'll also hide it. So I showed you earlier how this is, you can easily navigate up and down that stack. If you need to get a little bit of information, you can just click the little show button to show that there's 0 things going on this database. So it's not a fantastic example, but it does give you that, quick access to those performance metrics. We're getting close, so I'm going to skip over here to a couple little things real quick. Monitoring templates. I said I would show you guys guys and gals, how I prefer to do this. Generally, I just start with a clean slate. I'll start off with just creating a blank template. And one of my favorite features, this turned out so much better than even I had hoped, just because it's so easy to use. I can say include an Oracle certified template, and I can start off saying I want to monitor my PeopleSoft application. But along with that, I also want to include its ASM. I also want to include, if I can spell it, its listener. Maybe it's part of a plug, maybe it has a pluggable DB. I don't know. But you can go in, and as you add each one of these, it's going to continue to add kind of that out of the box best practice that we're talking about. What metrics, whether that's availability. And again, with availability, we're going to check not only is it down, but is it also not reporting that we discussed earlier. So all that's included in the monitoring status for the different resource types. But we're going to give you all those values. If you want to change it, you can come in, edit. If you don't like it, you can delete it. But again, it's really easy and simple to get started. Um, Another thing to mention real quick, let's go back to the health alarm. I also mentioned that, maybe you don't, you know, maybe that you're a DBA and you're not overly considered curious about wait time, although I would suspect you are. But you can easily come in, change the metric. You can, instead of a scatter, make it a line chart, make it a table. Um, if instead of DB or wait time, we would just want to do CPU utilization, we can hit, because it's, sorry. Uh, Database has an interesting thing where they don't want a dimension, but they do want a dimension. All right. So you can quickly come in and make any kind of changes to any of these. And like I said, you can come here, you can save this as your own default. You can save it as a JSON file. Like I said, share it with, other members on your team. All of that can be done here. And Uh, again, you can go out. We've got different videos on how to create your own metric extensions. We have maintenance windows. If you want to come in, you want to create a maintenance window for something. And I generally like to show like host. And let's say I choose this EBS application. And because I've chosen this EBS host and say if I'm going to go reboot this, then all these other things are going to be impacted as well. And so naturally, I'm going to need to put these in maintenance as well. And stack monitoring identified all of that for you. It understood the topology and the relationship between these two things. That now I can just say, hey, start this now because it crashed, whatever it is, and do it for 1 year from now, basically until I'm ready for it to end, and click create. So it's really quick, simple, and easy to get started. But with that said, I know that we have 5 minutes left. I want to stop here in case uh, there's any other questions. And I'll put up one last thing for Catherine here. And that's our where to go to learn more about this, right? And this QR code does a lot for you. The URL's there if you want to go there. Catherine said she'd share it with you. It
Yeah,
has
I've put all those links into the chat, so you can grab them there as well.
Cool. Thank you, Catherine. The main link has access to your live labs, the blog home where you can stay up to date with anything new that's coming out, links to our YouTube videos if you want to see more. You can also subscribe to Observability and Management's blog using RSS feeds. But there's pricing information, all that stuff as well. And then just to make sure that it shows up later, I'll put this so you can pause the video when it gets shared back out. But this is that example concurrent request that I shared with you earlier, as well as the query and the dimensions for you to be able to go set that up yourself.
And if there's no further questions, I can conclude this call. And thank you again for your time, Aaron and Anna. Great session.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you.